Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what is making the headlines with Sonia Sodha, Chief Leader Writer at The Observer, and Matt Dathan, Home Affairs Editor at The Times, with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what is on some of those front pages then. It's Make Grinch, that's the lead on the front of the Metro, as rail union leader Mick Lynch denies being a Grinch, stealing Christmas from travellers after announcing a new wave of strikes. Front of the eye then, the headline, Rebels force Sunak to back down on housing after nearly 50 Tory MPs threatened to protest over planning reforms. The Daily Mail also has the story about the unions, questioning when we will rein in the unions' intent on Christmas chaos. Country that bans love, the Mirror leading on a new development on the row over gay rights in the World Cup, over claims that England's captain was banned to not wear the One Love armband. The Financial Times leading with the latest on the FTX founder. The paper says he ran his crypto group as his personal fiefdom before its recent implosion. The head of the NHS has said women will be able to work from home if they are experiencing bad menopausal symptoms. That's on the front page of The Telegraph. Patients are refusing sick notes from their GPs due to fears they can't afford to take time off work, according to a front page Guardian exclusive. There's a rise in gambling addictions with a surge of people turning up to A&E, suicidal with the problem. That's in The Times. Daily Star leads with Saudi Arabia's shock footballing triumph over Lionel Messi's Argentina, labelling it the biggest World Cup upset ever. Well, a reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out those front pages while you listen to our guests. So let's return to Sonia and Matt. And Sonia, let's go to the Metro first. It's Mick Grinch. He, of course, denying he is thus. But certainly there'll be a great deal of disruption with the latest dates on offer from the RMT.
That's right. So new round of rail strikes. It's a set of 4 48-hour strikes. So that will be 2 before Christmas, 2 after Christmas. To make things worse, there's that period of engineering work that always falls between Christmas and New Year, when obviously people aren't commuting so much for work, but lots of people are trying to get around the country to see family. So it's going to lead to tons of travel disruption. I'm sure lots of people will do exactly what I did when the dates were announced, which is go and have a look at my diary and find, there are at least 2 days where I need to get to other bits of the country where there's going to be quite significant disruption for me. It's forecast that 1 in 5 services will run, potentially even fewer. So it's going to make it very difficult to get around the country. And then the period of engineering works is going to make it very difficult as well. So I think, I've got a lot of sympathy with the rail unions in terms of what they're trying to get for their members. It's people who've experienced real pay cuts, some of whom who aren't earning very much money. If you're talking about station staff over the last decades, those are pay cuts that they can't afford. But I think a question for the rail unions is it's a tricky line to sort of balance, because up until now, I think the public has been quite sympathetic and supportive of these strikes. Everyone knows there's a massive cost of living crisis on. But I think that the more that the disruption starts to interfere with people's Christmas plans and holiday plans, the more harder it will be to keep the public on side.
Yes, people have a lot of family members to see, don't they, Matt? And many people work over Christmas and New Year, shift workers, nurses, you name it. They have to see them elsewhere in that festive period. And the Daily Mail pointing out too that hospitality chiefs are warning that the strikes would cost them millions of pounds at one of the most lucrative times of the year as they recover from the pandemic and the worries about the cost of living crisis.
Yes, that's right. And the first series of strikes happening during that week where I think most companies hold their Christmas parties, the 13th and 14th of December and the 16th and 17th, and spanning over that weekend where a lot of the social plans will be affected as well. And as you say, it is coming after 2 years where families, but also the hospitality industry, as you said, have been harshly affected by COVID restrictions, and as Boris Johnson and the government found, you become very unpopular when you start messing with people's Christmas plans. And I think Mick Lynch, when he said this strike action will show just how important our workers are, I think it's maybe a sign that maybe previous strike action sort of failed really to win the argument for them, because with this era of remote working and people, being quite flexible with working from home when there are strike days, it's not had the impact it might have done before the pandemic. They're obviously resorting to striking over Christmas period to try and really hammer home that impact. I just think that might be a sign that the RMT are possibly losing the argument.
Well, we'll see. Certainly, Mick Lynch, I nearly said Mick Grinch there because I was reading the Mail's writing of it. Anyway, Mick Lynch suggesting that it's the government's fault, certainly, and he's determined to, as he put it, get a deal. So we'll see what happens next with that one. But in the meantime, let's move on to The Guardian, if we can, Sonia. Doctors are warning that people are refusing sick notes because they can't afford not to go to work.
Yes, so this is the new GP leader talking about what GPs are facing up and down the country. And it makes for some pretty grim reading. So there's what's in the headline there, which is that she says in her experience and her colleagues' experience, they're getting people who really are chronically ill, who should not be going into work, but they're refusing sick notes because they're saying that they just can't afford not to go to work. Because obviously, lots of employers pay full pay for a certain amount of time, but not all do. And after a while, you'll drop down onto statutory sick pay, which I think is just over £100 a week. So lots of people just can't simply afford to be on that. Now, that's really terrible for people's long-term health. And we know we've got a big problem with economic inactivity in this country at the moment. And that's because there's a lot of long-term sickness following the pandemic and people waiting for treatments on the NHS. And that really starts to interfere not just with the quality of people's lives, but also with, with economic growth. It's not the only thing that she talks about. She also talks about, the sorts of mental health distress she's seeing coming into her surgery. Colleagues are also reporting it. People coming in with vitamin deficiencies, so symptoms like feeling weak, mouth ulcers because they're just not eating properly, they're not getting proper nutrition from their food. And I think, this really does sort of highlight the extent to which poverty is an increasing problem in the country with the cost of living crisis, with the increasing energy prices. There are some people who simply have to make very difficult decisions between, can I afford to keep my home warm? Can I afford to feed my kids? Do I need to give up some meals in order for my kids to eat? Really, really difficult decisions that really in a rich country people shouldn't be facing. So I think it's another dimension of the cost of living crisis that it's really starting to impact on people's health.
Yes, and news of one council who's extending a pilot project where the NHS pays to heat people's homes for those who become more likely to enter hospital if their homes are cold, people with COPD or severe asthma or so. And so a real indicator, they've had great success, real indicator there that cold homes do make people iller, not to mention the pressure of the fear of what's coming this winter on their mental health, Matt.
Yes, that's right. And the Guardian has spoken to GPs, one of whom has warned that because people are becoming iller because of financial crisis, whether it be through increased mental health, asthma, breathing problems, mouth ulcers, as Sonia said, it's going to increase the pressure on the NHS longer term at a time when we have major backlogs. I think more than 7 million people are on waiting lists currently. So that just adds even more pressure to the overburdened NHS. And it is really quite a worrying time, especially as temperatures really dropped over the last week, hasn't it? So it's going to be a harsh winter, whether it be train strikes, whether it be the financial crisis and health problems.
Yes, and we seem to have that warning from National Grid today, which was subsequently rescinded about the cold snap causing pressure, on power systems. But the pressure on the NHS is also included in this article in the Daily Telegraph, Sonia, about menopausal women being able to work, who work in the NHS being able to do their jobs from home if their symptoms require it. The Telegraph suggesting that this will put extra pressure at a time when a record 7.1 million people are stuck on NHS waiting list, despite the demand of women for this to be noticed more.
Well, I think that's, it's quite a negative frame on the story in some ways that the Daily Telegraph has put on there. I think this is actually quite positive. So it's all about looking after your staff for the long term. And we know in the NHS, we've got huge staffing issues. And part of that is due to burnout. We haven't been training enough staff for the NHS over the last decade. Ministers haven't done enough planning around that. Staff working in the service are getting burned out and then they're leaving. So you've got to take care of your employees for the long term to make sure that doesn't happen. It's very short term to think, oh, well, let's just make them work more and more shifts and let's make them work through ill health and other health conditions and problems, because that's the only way to keep the NHS going. That's not the way to do it for the long term. I think this is very positive. We're having a much more constructive conversation about the symptoms of menopause as a society. Some women go through menopause and it has no impact on them at all, and that's great and fine. Some women do experience quite profound symptoms as a result of the hormonal changes, and it is a real issue, I think, for gender equality in the workplace about whether there are adjustments made in the workplace for the symptoms that women might experience. For example, hot flushes, but not just hot flushes. There's lots of other things that can go along with it. And so I think this is a really positive story about the NHS looking after its employees at a time when actually lots of them are burning out and leaving the service. And, as this article says, the NHS is the biggest employer of women in the country, and it should be setting an example. So I think it's obviously the NHS has got lots of difficulties at the moment around understaffing, but it is an absolutely false economy to say, well, let's just work all of our employees to the bone, because I think in the medium term, that actually makes the staffing issue worse because they leave due to burnout.
To politics now, in the Eye. It's also on the front page of the Telegraph, this story, Matt. A Tory rebellion, the first for Rishi Sunak, conceding to some 50 rebels about the idea of mandatory, centrally set housing targets to build 300,000 homes. Tell us more.
Yeah, that's right. It's part of the wider Levelling Up bill, but this really contentious part, which was due to be debated on Monday, would include plans to set a the national target to build 300,000 homes a year it'd be mandatory for local authorities to take into account that national target when deciding planning applications. But Tory rebels, up to 47 of them, put down an amendment that would have just made that advisory, and they really oppose this top-down mandatory imposition by the central government on local authorities, saying that the central government should not be deciding exactly where to build homes. It should be there's a lot of difference across the UK, and it's best for local authorities and local councillors to make those decisions. And so in the wake of this threat of defeat on Monday, they've pulled that particular debate. I think that the debate on tomorrow is still going ahead on the other parts of the bill, and Michael Gove he's saying he's hoping to bring back the contentious part before Christmas. And in the meantime, he hopes to win over the rebels. But I think this just shows you that Rishi Sunak can't. He might have a 71 seat majority, but with 47 Tories threatening to vote against the government on that, even though Labour would not back that amendment, it just shows you the power that backbenchers have in this current administration.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Yes, Sonia, I know you want to talk about that. We want to get on to the rest of it. I do apologise. Maybe next time. Lots more still to come. The latest from Qatar as well. And, of course, the latest on Man U and Ronaldo. Well, welcome back. You're watching the Press Preview with me once again, Sonia Sodha, Chief Leader Writer at The Observer, and Matt Dathan, Home Affairs Editor at The Times. Welcome back to both of you. So let's go to Qatar, shall we, Matt? Daily Mirror, continuing coverage, if we can talk about the continuing controversy, picking up a number of different examples beyond the armbands, not least the word love, which was due to be in the collar of the Belgian team's top, which has also had to be removed. And of course the news last night that the rainbow hats of the Welsh fans that were taken off them. There we go, there's an example of one of them.
Yeah, it's incredible really that it led to its FIFA going to ban any kind of solidarity that countries and teams want to show for the LGBT plus community. It was a subtle little word in the collar, which many people wouldn't be able to even see, that the Belgium wanted to wear on its away kit. And then today we've learned more details about just how much Harry Kane and other captains were threatened if they'd worn the One Love armband. I think the Danish FA revealed today that captains were even threatened with a one-match ban, which is just quite incredible. I can understand FIFA not wanting countries to be making political statements, because if you allow one country to make a political statement, it might open the door to, say, Russia or other countries, maybe Israel or Iran, making political statements against other countries. But this isn't against a country. This is supporting people's right to be gay, for example. It's just quite astonishing just how much FIFA are going to stop any kind of gesture from fans and teams.
Just quickly, Sonia, as well. I mean, is there some people saying there's some hypocrisy here, because you obviously play cricket against Pakistan, the other newspapers, The Guardian, The Times, all celebrating the Saudis' result against Argentina with their, really questionable human rights record. So, has Qatar had an unfair focus on its records, do you think?
Well, I don't think so, because it's very different when they're the host nation, and you obviously face more scrutiny on your human rights record if you're, rewarding a country, as it were, by sort of giving them the competition, although obviously they have to spend a lot of money on hosting it. And I think, it's obviously the LGBT rights issue, but there are also massive issues in Qatar around women. Women are not allowed to do quite a lot within that society without having male guardians sign it off, things like travel abroad, for example. So really serious rights issues there. And then there's also the very high numbers of migrants who've lost their lives in building that stadium. So I don't think it's unfair at all, actually. I think what's quite interesting is that there are these further details emerging about threats that FIFA made. I think there's serious questions for FIFA about how they award these competitions, and then also the way they conduct them, and the way that they've national football federations. But The Guardian is actually reporting today that the German Football Federation is intending on taking FIFA to court to sort of try and get a legal remedy to them banning the German team from wearing this love symbol. So I think that will be a very interesting one to watch.